Keshavanand Bharati case. Keshavanand Bharati case 1973 addressed the balance between individual right and Parliament's constitutional amending power originating from land reforms laws in Kerala affecting religious institutions like Ednir. Keshavanand Bharati challenged these amendments, arguing they violated his rights. The Supreme Court verdict 7-6 verdict upheld the Parliament's power to amend the Constitution but introduced the basic structure doctrine, stating core principles like judicial review, federalism, fundamental rights cannot be altered. This doctrine has since limited legislative overreach, protecting the Constitution's integrity while allowing socio-economic reforms within these boundaries. Case background: a landmark judgment balancing the individual right with Parliament's power to amend the Constitution. It is originated from Kerala's 1950-60s land reform, aimed at redistributing land from large landowners to disadvantaged and landless. In 1963, Kerala land reforms was enacted, imposing restrictions on land ownership and granting the government the authority to acquire surplus land for redistribution. This legislation notably affect various religious institutions, including Ednir Mutt, overseen by Keshavanand Bharati, which possessed considerable land holdings. Subsequent amendments introduced in 1969 1971 sought to enhance governmental powers over land ownership while reducing judicial oversight. On March 21, 1970, Keshavanand Bharati filed a petition in the Supreme Court under Article 32 of the Constitution challenging these amendments. He contended that amendments violated his fundamental rights as enshrined in the Article 14 right to equality, Article 19 1F right to property, right, Article 25 freedom of religion, Article 26 right to manage religious affairs. This case ultimately culminated in establishment of basic structure doctrine, which posit that certain fundamental features of constitution are inviolable and cannot be amended by legislative action. Summary: the case was heard by 13 judge bench, one of the largest in the Indian judicial history, over 68 days from October 31, 1970 to March 23, 1973. Supreme Court judgment was delivered on April 24, 1973 with majority of 7-6. Court ruled that while Parliament has a broad power to amend the Constitution under Article 368, it cannot alter or destroy its basic structure. This ruling effectively established what is now known as basic structure doctrine, which serves as safeguard against potential legislative overreach. Arguments of petitioner: Keshavanand Bharati's legal team, led by senior advocate Nani Palkewala, presented several key arguments as amendments violated fundamental rights, exceeded Parliament's amending limits by altering the Constitution's basic structure, undermined judicial review and property rights. First, violation of fundamental rights. Amendments infringed upon fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Second, limits on amending power. Power to amend should not exceed altering the basic structure or essential feature of the Constitution. Third, unconstitutionality of amendment. The amendment challenged 24th, 25th, 29th Constitutional Amendment Acts were unconstitutional as they undermined judicial review and separation of power. Fourth, right to property is fundamental right, cannot be taken away without the due process. Argument of respondent. The state of Kerala argued Parliament's unlimited amending power under Article 368 was essential for socio-economic justice, reforming feudal structures, regulating property rights for public welfare, and advancing social equity. First, unlimited amending power. Parliament possesses unlimited power to amend any part of the Constitution under Article 368. Second, socio-economic justice. Amendments were necessary for achieving socio-economic justice and reforming outdated feudal structures. Third, regulations of right. Right to property is not an absolute fundamental right, but can be regulated by law or for public welfare. Fourth one, legislative competence. Amendments aimed at promoting social justice, reducing poverty were justified within the legislative competence. Judgment. Case was upheld Parliament's power to Parliament's power to have authority to amend the constitution, but emphasized that this power is not absolute. It cannot alter or destroy constitution's basic structure. The basic structure doctrine asserts the certain principles, including supremacy of the constitution, rule of law, separation of power, federalism, fundamental rights, form the constitution's core framework. Judicial review. The court reaffirmed its right to review amendments made by Parliament. It stated that any amendments infringing upon the basic structure could be unconstitutional. Constitutionality of amendment. While upholding the validity 24th Constitutional Amendment Act, which clarified the Parliament's amending power, it found parts of 25th Constitutional Amendment Act unconstitutional for infringing upon judicial review. Impact on Constitution. Keshavanand Bharati case had a significant impact by establishing basic structure doctrine, which limits the Parliament's amendment power, reinforces judicial review, safeguards fundamental rights against the unchecked authority. First, establishment of basic structure doctrine. Parliament can amend the constitution, it cannot alter the fundamental framework. Includes supremacy of the constitution, rule of law, separation of power, federalism, judicial review, fundamental rights, judicial independence. Second, limits on parliamentary power. Impose limits on amending power under Article 368. Third, reinforcement of judicial review. As part, Supreme Court upheld the judicial review as a part of basic structure, declaring amendment that infringe on it unconstitutional, thus reinforcing the judiciary's role in protecting the constitutional values. For socio-economic reform and constitutional amendment, ruling recognized Parliament's authority to enact socio-economic reforms, provided they do not violate fundamental rights or alter the constitution's basic structure, allowing for social justice while maintaining integrity. Impact on future judicial decisions. The case has served as precedent for subsequent judgments regarding constitutional amendments, fundamental rights, solidifying the basic structure doctrine, its significance in safeguarding democracy. Political and historical context. Delivered during politically charged era, the judgment emphasized preventing unchecked power in amending foundational governance aspect, acting as a safeguard against authoritarianism.